How goes it, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Emmett, and as always, please do your own research. I'm but one talking head amongst a sea of many, and I'm looking at things from a 30,000 foot view. And so far as today's video, if the title hasn't given it away, I had to stop a recording session like midway through because it is something that finally populated on my YouTube feed while I was getting some footage. And that is the case of Ready or Not by Void Interactive. And please, allow me to pull up some information here that was released into a playable or early alpha, or early access state on Steam on December 13th, 2023. And for a lot of people who may not know, Ready or Not, and I'm going to be reading the blurb here, Ready or Not is an intense tactical first-person shooter that depicts a modern-day world in which SWAT police units are called to defuse hostile and confronting situations. For some people, that may just be, okay, well, obviously you just read the blurb. That doesn't tell me anything. Well, this harkens over to a couple of other games that actually had dark stories behind it. One of the games of which that I personally have not played, however, watching some ordinary gamers slowly trudge through that game, SWAT 4, for example. And as the name, or as the game blurb pretty much specifies, I apologize one second, because for some reason, the secondary recording software is still going, so that's going to be a pain to edit. But as the blurb describes, it is intense action, and they really, at least at time of me doing this, do not hold any punches back. You will see blood, you will see gore. There is a story to this game where you will see some things that will fuck with your head. This is definitely a game where it stands right now, I wouldn't even put as 18 if I was to go by ESRB ratings, but I have my own issues with ESRB ratings. That will be explained in a later video. But in all actuality, where the game stands right now, it is of my personal opinion that this game would definitely receive an AO rating if it were to be ported over to anything else, which some people would say, okay, that's fine. If it has an AO rating, then not a lot of people are probably going to play it. And that's exactly kind of sort of the point of what Void Interactive is doing with this game. Now, first and foremost, before anybody starts hopping up and telling me, oh, I'm for this, I'm for that, I want to make it extremely fucking clear. I apologize, I'm trying to cut back on my cursing. But I want to make it extremely clear that when it comes to the case of censorship in video games, I am not too much of a big fan. Video games for me was that art form growing up that nobody really had too much of a grasp on. It was like the early days of YouTube when it first came on. Nobody knew what was going on, but you just threw everything at the wall. And obviously a little touch of common sense and, tasteful nudes were applied. And then everything began to get corporatized and such to where creativity, while it is a nice refresher in the case of this game, or at least non-censorship, I should say, it is something that a lot of individuals, myself included, would actually crave. Because if you pay attention to this game, and I'm going to have to gather this later, again, I apologize, but if you pay attention to what this game was as to what it now, if I can actually get this graph to pop up, since the announcement, this thing has taken a sharp nosedive in approval, and I understand where gamers are coming from, but overall, going down the list here, Jesus Christ, buckle up. Again, I understand why they did this. I do not agree with it, though. I can be of two minds about this. Ready or Not is getting censored very obviously, and this is mainly just in prep for the console release in parity. And some people may say, well, why are we getting censored for the console release? I am not a game developer, first and foremost, but one thing that seems to be a common instance in which some games do get censored is because, well, it's easier just to go and modify one version of the game than modify multiple sections of the game. Now, I say this knowing that any game that is released in China automatically, well, correction, any game that is from any other place, say example for America, if you're released in China, automatically is censored for the Chinese market. World of Warcraft does this because China, for one reason or another by law, cannot show skeletons. So what instead they do, they show little tombstones. I had to borrow this analogy from Asmongold. He kind of sort of introduced me to what the hell was going on here, which for that market is perfectly fine. However, that is still a different set of code that the WoW developers have to do for a different territory. Now, if I was somebody who just joined on board and I didn't know that was a rule, I'd be asking 50 different questions, and with little oversight and due diligence, I would probably be reverting it back, not knowing that I am potentially getting the game in trouble. It's easier just to keep everything on one flat board, and if everything is kind of sort of mediocrely censored that pleases everybody, which is the wrong thing in my opinion, it makes it easier for coding and such. That is just the first excuse of it. Now, obviously, when you release games like this that are censored to try to appeal to a massive market at the same time while taking this game down from my recommendation of an adult only rating to something like an M18 or 18 plus rating, you have more people trying this game out. More people means more eyes, which means more money, and some people I understand would have an issue with this, but at the end of the day, something that I did not touch on very well with my last video on Stop Killing Games is that a business is a business. Even if it's in the world of games, developers still need to make money. The publisher still needs to make money. It keeps the lights on, it keeps the servers on, and it keeps updates coming until the game's end of life. And in the case of Void Interactive, I feel like this is a little bit more pressured on them, because Void Interactive, looking at their catalog right now, they only have the one game. This is it. Ready or Not is, I think, their make or break. And for them to go to such an extent that they censor the game so that way they can prep it for console release, something tells me that if I were to, I apologize again, breaking away, Ready or Not Steam charts. I believe they've only had maybe like 7,000 some odd players at a max. Okay, so no, that's just 31 minutes ago. Wow, all-time peak of 55,000 players. But 7,961 playing at the minute, but in the 24-hour peak, 17,000 players, which is nothing really to scoff at, ladies and gentlemen. That is still a massive amount of players that are playing this game. However, those are still sales that over time do not mean as much. Hopefully you understand what I'm getting at here. So with the release of consoles, they kind of sort of, by their guideline, I would assume, have to narrow this down. More sales keeps the lights on, keeps more content coming. And I, again, understand why people are upset about this because, and in my case in particular, I feel like my version of the game is getting gimped so that way somebody else can try to enjoy it. I can't enjoy my steak because little Timmy can't chew it. How is that fair? Especially with the price that I paid for before this update went through. I get it. I understand. Outside of that, some other people want to take it into different directions. And again, I will understand if you try to rationalize that with me. But overall, I think this is generally where people are coming from. And correct me if I'm wrong, please. Anyway, back on the subject I was hopefully talking about. Yeah, Void Interactive just has this one game, excuse me. It is a make or break for them. So they're trying to get as many eyes on it as possible to make as much money as possible so they can fund other projects. Well, and from a business perspective, again, I see this. I'm not happy about it, but I understand. You make as much money as you can from this game. You try to keep the updates coming in your next game when you have a little bit more money to play with and a little bit more free time. That next game, if this one is still, you know, copacetic and good with a lot of people, you can start making one that experiments a little bit. This is pretty much how a lot of companies, I believe, will try to start their business, but it's also kind of sort of a double-edged sword. I'm pretty sure by now everybody has heard the phrase that a game made for everybody is a game made for nobody. And in the case of console, while they have been begging for a shooter for God knows how long that isn't Call of Duty or isn't Battlefield, I think this is a step in the right direction, but you're giving them like 2 fries when you could be giving them a large McDonald's fry. I'm sorry, warm McDonald's fry are the best right now. I don't know why I'm craving them, but god damn, I'm really hungry for some fries right now, man. But ladies and gentlemen, with all that being said, we're focusing more on the negative side of this. The main thing that people dislike when it comes to censoring of their games is they feel like their product is less than what they bought it for. And I'm one to agree with them. I paid for the game that is supposed to be in this state at this price. Is it still functional? Yes, but you've taken away some of the grit that people are looking for. You're taking away the desire, that deep shady content that people are looking for in their games. Sanitized games are fine for a certain audience, but in a game like this, the grit is much welcomed, and it's a vast difference amongst anything else that's in its category to date. pretty much to go back to that, you would have to go back to SWAT 4, which I believe, actually, let me just go ahead and look it up right now. SWAT 4 release date, if I can spell, which was released, dear God, all the way back in 2005. Oh my goodness. And this is to say that I will say that censorship apparently has been cropping its head up again when it comes to games. I know there was another game that just came out, I think Onimusha, yes, Onimusha 2, where they censored one of the female characters. I should probably get into this game, the first one, because it seems to have good reviews, not the second one, or, you know, start I wouldn't say sailing the high seas, but looking for a good copy to play. But censorship is one of those things that's been cropping up again and rearing its ugly head. And I feel like with the censorship aspect right now, it's going through somebody at the top who, in my personal opinion, doesn't really need to be there. And let me explain myself. And part of the reason why I dislike the ESRB. The ESRB, or excuse me, these games, while they do have a rating scheme for a reason, the rating scheme pretty much dictates who will see the game and how much money they will get off of it, which at a glance I would say is fine. But the problem is when you start inventing a rating scheme with it, which I believe the ESRB is government owned. Who owns the ESRB? Who owns the ESRB? Entertainment Software Rating Board. Prior to the implementation of Film and Classification Act. Oh, it is a self-regulatory organization. Okay, that's kind of even worse. But with the ESRB, as proven in the case of, you know, surprise mechanics when it comes to Battlefield and the Balatro incident, the ESRB, while it is self-regulatory, could be bought and sold. That's my main issue when it comes to that. If you throw enough money in their direction, like with most other things, they'll tend to agree with whoever's giving them the most money, which is, in my personal opinion, disgraceful, because this board, for a couple of things I will say, is probably the main reason as to why some other games nowadays don't have grit, outside of companies coming back and trying to make it accessible to everybody for trying to make the most money. But they still never learned the lesson of a game for everybody is a game for nobody. Well, that, and when you try to include needless politics into it, I'm still looking at you, Dragon Age. You could have been great. I don't know what you did, but you decided to fuck your own face on this one. Again, I apologize. I'm trying to cut back on my cursing, but I feel like this one was just inevitable. That game sucked. But yes, players are looking for this creativity, this grit that nobody is really providing, or in the case of this game, they're providing the grit up front and then redacting it later to try to appeal to everyone, or at least to try to appeal to a wider audience. And again, from a business perspective, I completely understand. From a creativity perspective, and as an early consumer, that's nonsense. Please, I hope you reverse this decision the second that it's released, or you just say, nah, just kidding, we're not doing that, and just take the hit on the rating. I sincerely hope so, because again, people are looking for this experience. And on to one of the final things, and that is the review bombing of this game. Look, people have the right to their opinion, whether you agree or disagree with them. They have the right to their opinion. And some people, just like with everything else, also have the right to ignore that opinion, especially when they choose to act, well, like a bunch of animals, thinking that their opinions matters. And when I say this, those of you in particular know who I'm talking about. But people have the right to voice their opinion. It's like I said, hopefully in the Stop Killing Games argument, the only reason review bombing exists is because there's a message that needs to get across that the developers aren't listening to. In the case of Void Interactive, these guys who out front said, hey, look, we know we have a school shooter level, but we're going to do it tastefully, and damn well did it. You mean to tell me that you decided to backtrack on that now because console? Again, you're a business. I understand, but at the same time, maybe it's just me, but I feel like at a certain point I would have just taken the hit, because the word of mouth of this game was already, from what I'm seeing, growing until well, the pro word of mouth, excuse me, verse was already growing, and now that you seem to have stepped in this to try to release it on consoles again, it's just their regulations and guidelines. I'm willing to give you that benefit of the doubt, but you stepped in it by placating to that instead of just saying, you know what, no, we're going to deliver the game as is, and just taking the hit on the rating. All in all, while I am not in charge of Void Interactive, that's whomever is over there, I will not tell you what to do, but my opinion will be voiced. Now, I did not downvote or negatively review this game. When it comes to game reviews, I will tell everybody here I am awful at that. I just go by a general vibe, and if the vibe is good, cool, I'll keep playing. If the vibe is bad, then you'll see that I'll stop playing it probably within an hour or two. Needless to say, when it comes to a lot of JRPGs and even the current game that I'm playing, which is Dynasty Warriors Origin, that one was kind of rough for me to just sit down. I'm sorry, my brain's weird. Now, I would also be, as a closing, remiss to say that the usual suspects have also started popping up when it comes to people saying they want the gore back in this game. And those are the people who are calling the gamers who want this sick and deranged individuals. Now, we have seen this argument pop up every couple of years when somebody does something extremely stupid. And I remember one of the first cases that this popped up, it was the Virginia Tech shooting with, I forgot what this dude's name was, but he had a girlfriend named freaking Jellybean or something of that nonsense, and he just went and shot up the Virginia Tech school. And I remember watching this on the news, and Virginia Tech was unfortunately in my state at the time, and I thought it was just horrible. And then it eventually, without rhyme or reason, came up. It's like, oh, well, he played a lot of Call of Duty, and Call of Duty is what caused him to warp his mind. It's like, well, that can't necessarily be the case, because I'm hearing from 3 other sources that apparently this dude was already off his gourd to begin with. What did a video game have to do with any of this? I don't fully understand. And then later on, I forgot what other shooting happened, but at the time, President Donald J. Trump got involved with some kind of talks that essentially just circled the drain and led to freaking nothing. Look, my point is, this conversation happens every couple of years, and the people that are trying to say that the gamers are disgusting about this, honestly, in my personal opinion, I don't believe that you people, well, I think we all can agree that you people do have zero clue about what the hell that you're talking about. You really don't. You're just trying to have some kind of counter argument to somebody by calling them sick and deranged. Yeah, I learned a new word, by the way. It's essentially just an ad hominem attack. You're disgusting because you want this in the game. You're disgusting because, you know, you enjoy this in the game and you need to get your head looked at. Well, I would actually say that's fine. Look, worst comes to worst, if there is some kind of weird correlation, which, by the way, has been proven that there's no correlation with that, but, you know, there's a reason I say do your own research. But if there is some correlation, what would you rather have this individual do who enjoys content like that? Do you want him to practice on something live, or do you want to keep him on the screen? Realistically, I'm going to keep him on the screen. If players want that grit and realism, that is their choice to indulge in that grit and realism. And these people coming out of the woodworks to say that they're ashamed of this, that, and the third, it's like, you're really no better than you're really just, you're moral grandstanders. You're just trying to have an argument for the sake of an argument, in my opinion, while at the same time trying to claim that you're the better person. Now, I wouldn't exactly call it virtue signaling to an extent, but I would call it just more so, well, moral grandstanding, I guess, would be the better term to use here. Your arguments don't really make any sense. You're essentially just saying it should be censored because I think that it's too brutal. Cool, nobody else cares. If you think that it's too brutal, the easiest solution to do would be just don't buy the game. That's how it's always been before we had this whole charade of censorship come on through. If you don't like it, just don't buy it. And I know that's a little dangerous thinking, especially in the case of Patrick Soderlund, but that's how it always used to be. If it wasn't for you, then you just didn't bother with it. But I want to be included. It's like, okay, well, you're going to have to accept the fucking thing for, again, pardon my language, I apologize, but you're going to have to accept the thing for all of its flaws, whether you like it or not. Sucks to suck. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have on the situation. I apologize if I didn't bring anything new to the table, or if I did, I'm glad I could actually get my voice out there. So far as all of this, I don't know when I'm going to be making another video. Y'all stay safe, have a good one, and I'm out.